right, today we're tackling a huge economic puzzle, one that has some of the sharpest minds on Wall Street completely divided. It's all about a proposed fiscal agenda that creates this really fascinating and, frankly, pretty risky set of possibilities for all of us. Let's dive in. So, think about this for a second. What happens if you're in a car and you slam your foot on the gas and the brake at the exact same time? It's kind of hard to say, right? Well, that's pretty much the question facing the U.S. economy right now, all thanks to a proposed mix of policies that are pulling in completely opposite directions. On one hand, you've got your foot on the gas. These are policies designed to make the economy go faster. Things like big tax cuts, getting rid of regulations, and something called fiscal easing, which is really just a fancy way of saying the government is trying to boost the economy. But at the very same time, the other foot is slamming on the brake. We're talking about aggressive tariffs that create friction in trade and squeeze the supply of goods. These are two incredibly powerful forces going head-to-head. So what you end up with is this massive economic tug-of-war. Let's really get into what this battle of conflicting forces could mean for everybody. This whole situation introduces us to a really key concept called bimodal risk. Now, normally, when economists try to predict the future, they give you a range of possibilities, with one outcome being the most likely, somewhere in the middle. Bimodal risk is totally different. It means the economy is facing two very distinct, almost opposite futures, with not much chance of landing in between. It's like you're at a fork in the road, and the two paths lead to completely different destinations. And believe me, this isn't just some theory being debated in a classroom. We're talking about the heavy hitters here. JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, BNP Paribas. They're all dedicating serious brainpower to entangling this exact puzzle, not just for their clients, but for their own huge multi-billion-dollar investment strategies. Okay, so with all this uncertainty floating around, you might be surprised to hear there are actually a couple of key areas where these expert forecasters do agree. So let's start there, on common ground. The first thing pretty much everyone agrees on is this. No matter which path the economy ends up taking, the journey is going to be inflationary. This mix of policies is just seen as fundamentally pushing prices higher. And you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to what the banking giant BNP Paribas had to say. They make it crystal clear, arguing that this combination creates a perfect storm. They state flat out that these moves are all likely to add to inflationary pressure. So why are they so sure about inflation? Well, you can think of it as a three-part chain reaction. First, tariffs instantly make imported stuff more expensive. At the same time, tax cuts put more money in people's wallets, which drives up demand. And finally, companies here at home facing their own higher costs are probably going to pass those costs onto us. So you've got pressure coming from all sides. The second major point of agreement follows right from the first one. When you have less tax money coming in and more government spending going out, that means bigger government deficits. And when you have all that inflationary pressure building up, what's the Federal Reserve's go-to tool to fight it? You guessed it, keeping interest rates higher for longer. And you can actually see these firms putting their money where their mouth is. Morgan Stanley, for instance, is taking what's called an underweight duration position. Now, that sounds super technical, but all it really means is that they're setting up their investments to do well if interest rates go up. It's a huge signal about where they think things are headed. Okay, so if everybody agrees on where inflation and interest rates are going, what's left to argue about? Well, it turns out it's about the most important piece of the whole puzzle, actual economic growth. This really is the central mystery. If the outlook for prices and borrowing costs is so clear, where does all this bimodal risk, this dramatic fork in the road, actually come from? And here's the answer. The entire debate, all the uncertainty, it all boils down to one single question. What will the net impact on real economic growth be? Which force is going to win? Will the gas pedal of stimulus overpower the brake of protectionism, or is it going to be the other way around? And this is where you get two completely different stories about the future. The case for a boom says that all that stimulus from tax cuts and deregulation is going to supercharge the economy. But the case for a slowdown says that all the trade friction from tariffs is going to act like a massive anchor, dragging the whole economy down. So let's look at the bull case for a second. Here, you've got Wells Fargo arguing that the pro-growth policies are going to win the day. They expect a big surge in spending from both consumers and businesses that will lift the entire economy up. But then, on the other side, you've got the bear case. UBS is looking at the exact same set of facts and highlighting the opposite force. They're worried that these tariff-related pressures will be the dominant factor, leading to slower growth and a really tricky economic situation.
And honestly, this quote from BNP Paribas wraps it all up perfectly. While they're sure about inflation, they admit that when it comes to what actually happens to the economy, quote, the net impact is less clear-cut. That uncertainty is the entire story. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? What does this bimodal risk actually mean for the economy and for investors? Let's put all the pieces together into one clear picture. It really boils down to this. Step 1, experts are pretty sure higher inflation is on the menu. Step 2, because of that, we should expect higher interest rates. And that leaves us with step 3. The giant flashing question mark hovering over everything is the future of real economic growth. And here's the bottom line. We're not looking at a choice between a good outcome and a slightly less good one. The economy is facing two fundamentally different futures. One path leads to a potential growth boom fired up by all that stimulus. The other path? A pretty miserable stagflationary slowdown, where growth stalls out but prices just keep rising, all choked off by trade friction. And make no mistake, this isn't just a problem for people on Wall Street. This deep uncertainty is the main strategic challenge for everyone. For the policymakers trying to steer the economy, for businesses trying to plan ahead, and for all of us just trying to understand what's coming next. So we end up right where we started, with this fundamental uncertainty. The experts are divided, and the economy is perched on a nice edge between two very different futures. And so the final question, the one we'll leave with you, is which path do you think it will ultimately take?